The morning began like any other quiet Tuesday in Maple Ridge Estates, our peaceful little neighborhood, where the loudest thing you'd usually hear was a lawnmower or a dog barking at the mailman. I was sitting on my porch, coffee in hand, when six black SUVs rolled up to the house across the street. Within moments, agents in dark windbreakers stamped with bold yellow letters FBI were streaming through Patricia Lawson's front door. They moved with military precision, hauling out box after box of documents while Patricia stood on her lawn in her fuzzy slippers and her trademark HOA president sash, shouting that this was all a giant misunderstanding. Something about voluntary contributions. But before we get there, let me rewind. I'm Daniel Foster and my family moved into Maple Ridge Estates 3 months ago. We thought we'd found the dream home. 247 Pine Valley Court, a gorgeous colonial with a wide porch and a big backyard where our three kids could run wild. And the cherry on top, thanks to an old property line loophole from the 1970s, our home wasn't technically part of the Maple Ridge HOA. We thought that was a blessing. Patricia Lawson did not. The day after we moved in, she showed up on our doorstep like clockwork, clipboard in hand, smile sharp enough to cut glass. Despite the 90 degrees heat, she wore a blazer with HOA president embroidered in gold thread as if it were a badge of honor. She introduced herself with the kind of practiced politeness only people in power seem to perfect, then casually mentioned that although we weren't technically required to join the HOA, it would be in our best interest to contribute the monthly dues of $95. Anyway, she said it like it wasn't even a question. I smiled and told her politely that since our property wasn't part of the HOA, we wouldn't be paying dues. That smile of hers faltered just slightly. Before morphing into a tight grimace, she told me I was making a mistake and that everyone in Maple Ridge contributes to the community fund. Then she dropped the phrase that would become her favorite weapon. Neighborhood harmony depends on universal participation. I thanked her for her time and closed the door. That was my first mistake. Patricia Lawson didn't handle rejection well. The harassment began subtly. Each morning I'd find a new flyer tucked under my windshield wiper, cheerful pamphlets about the benefits of HOA membership. At first they seemed harmless, but soon the headlines grew more unsettling. Unity through compliance, the dangers of nonconformity. Then came the notes in our mailbox, passive-aggressive reminders about maintaining community standards. Patricia started appearing at the edge of our property with a tape measure, meticulously recording the height of our grass and the exact angle of our trash bins. One morning I caught her crouched near our flower bed, measuring the distance between our decorative roses. When I asked what she was doing, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Optimal row spacing is critical for property values." She wasn't joking. She even had a binder color-coded, no less, filled with guidelines for plant placement. Guidelines she'd apparently written herself. My wife Sarah found it funny at first. She waved at Patricia through the window while the woman furiously scribbled notes in her little binder. But the laughter stopped the day Patricia started photographing our kids playing in the yard and posting the pictures on the neighborhood Facebook page. The captions, things like unsupervised children lowering community safety standards. That was the moment Sarah's amusement turned into anger. It only got worse. Patricia started writing long self-righteous essays on Facebook about how non-HOA homes attract undesirable elements. She even made charts, fake ones, claiming that property values within 5100 FT of a non-HOA house dropped 30% a year. That's when I decided to try the diplomatic route. I invited her over for coffee, thinking maybe a friendly conversation would ease the tension. I thanked her for caring about the neighborhood but asked her to please respect our privacy. She smiled, nodded, and told me she completely understood, even complimented Sarah's banana bread. 2 days later, a police cruiser pulled up to our house. The officer explained they'd gotten a report about a possible fence height violation. After measuring and finding nothing wrong, he mentioned it was the third complaint that week, all from the same person. The officer, a tired-looking man named Deputy Richards, sighed and told me quietly that Patricia was well known to the department. She called so often they'd made her own file. He suggested I start documenting everything. That night, Sarah decided she'd had enough. See, my wife isn't just smart, she's a forensic accountant, which means she's trained to notice when money doesn't add up. So while I focused on photographing Patricia's harassment, Sarah turned her attention to the Maple Ridge HOA's finances, and what she uncovered was interesting. The HOA collected $95 a month from $142 homes, over $13,000 monthly. But where was it all going? The only community projects we'd ever seen were a few new flower beds and a summer picnic that couldn't have cost more than $500. Something wasn't right. Sarah tried the formal route, requested financial statements through the proper channels. Patricia ignored every single one. Instead, she doubled down. She started hosting HOA meetings in her backyard, conveniently positioning her speakers to face our house. Every meeting was the same. Hours of speeches about the dangers of noncompliance and certain households that refused to contribute to the greater good. And that's when Sarah decided to dig deeper. Sarah's investigation uncovered something unbelievable. The Maple Ridge HOA wasn't even a real nonprofit. It had never filed for 501c3 status, wasn't registered with the state, and had zero legitimate oversight. Patricia Lawson had been collecting over $160,000 a year under the guise of community dues, without a board, without elections, and without a single ounce of transparency. Through public records requests and a bit of clever digging, Sarah traced Patricia's spending, and what she found could have been ripped straight from a crime show. There were purchases for a luxury hot tub, multiple vacations to Cabo San Lucas, and bizarrely, an entire collection of ceramic unicorns Patricia had logged as neighborhood beautification projects. But the kicker, a $40,000 kitchen renovation listed under HOA headquarters improvements. Sarah meticulously compiled her findings into a detailed report, cross-referencing each suspicious purchase with the HOA meeting minutes Patricia had filed with the county. The problem, those meetings never happened. Not one. Sarah went door to door interviewing neighbors who all said the same thing: they'd never attended a single quarterly meeting. Most didn't even know one was supposedly held. When our report was complete, Sarah submitted it to the IRS, the state attorney general, and just to be safe, the FBI's white-collar crime division. Then we waited. Meanwhile, Patricia was spiraling. She launched an all-out campaign to make our lives miserable. She called the police, claiming we were running an illegal daycare because neighborhood kids played in our yard. She reported our golden retriever Max to animal control, calling him a public menace. She even filed a complaint with the health department, accusing us of improper garbage storage. The false reports only grew more ridiculous. When I took family photos in our backyard, she claimed we were operating a commercial photography business. When we hosted a birthday party for our 8-year-old, she called it a suspicious gathering. She even called the fire marshal to report unsafe grill usage. Every agency found nothing wrong, and a few officials quietly admitted they were getting tired of her antics. Deputy Richards told me the department had started keeping records of her false reports. They were even considering charging her with misuse of emergency services. Then came Patricia's fatal mistake. She sent out a letter to every resident announcing that due to new state regulations, HOA dues were being increased to $150 a month, effective immediately. The letter threatened legal action, even property liens against anyone who failed to pay. The letterhead looked official, complete with a fake state registration number and bolded phrases like, "Failure to comply may result in wage garnishment." That letter hit hard. Many residents were elderly or on fixed incomes. A young family down the street had just gone through a medical emergency, and Patricia's threats terrified them. But when they showed up at the next HOA meeting to protest, Patricia didn't back down. She told them coldly that financial hardship isn't my problem and that maintaining property values requires sacrifice. Unfortunately for her, one of those residents was George Hoffman, a retired federal prosecutor, and George wasn't buying her story. He started digging on his own, and when he compared notes with Sarah, the full scope of Patricia's corruption came to light. George still had friends in federal law enforcement. A few phone calls later, things started moving quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia had embezzled more than $400,000 over 6 years, filing false tax returns and running the HOA like her personal slush fund. George discovered that Patricia had even been falsifying official meeting minutes, claiming unanimous votes for every single measure she introduced, including one that named her HOA president for life with a $60,000 annual salary. The supposed board of directors completely fake. She listed people who had moved away years ago and even invented names. One board member apparently was Jennifer Excellence. George later found out that it was the name of Patricia's childhood doll. When George and Sarah presented their combined findings to authorities, who were already investigating thanks to Sarah's original report, the case exploded. Investigators uncovered Patricia's secret bank accounts and a shell company called Lawson Community Services LLC, which supposedly existed for neighborhood enhancement. In reality, it existed for one purpose: funneling HOA funds straight into Patricia's personal accounts. And that brings us back to that Tuesday morning. 3 months after we moved in, I stood on my porch watching 6 black SUVs pull up across the street. FBI agents swarmed Patricia's house, hauling out boxes of files, computers, and binders of doctored records. They even found her real accounting books hidden in the attic, complete with handwritten notes detailing how she siphoned money from the community. One entry even described plans to expand her operations to neighboring HOAs. When agents finally led Patricia out in handcuffs, she was still yelling and insisting it was all a misunderstanding. She screamed at me specifically, claiming that if I'd just paid my fair share, none of this would have happened. She shouted that I destroyed the harmony of Maple Ridge Estates, that property values would collapse without her. But it was over. The investigation revealed the full picture: mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, racketeering. Even her ridiculous ceramic unicorns valued at $30,000 were listed as embezzled assets. At her trial, Patricia tried to claim she thought she was entitled to the money as compensation for her hard work. The prosecutor didn't even flinch. He pointed to one of her purchases, a boat named Community Pride, bought entirely with HOA funds. He calmly reminded the court that Maple Ridge Estates doesn't even have a lake. Patricia tried to argue that the boat was for community lake patrols. The jury wasn't impressed. She was convicted. On every charge, the judge, clearly exhausted by Patricia's dramatic outbursts and constant interruptions, sentenced her to 5 years in federal prison and ordered $487,000 in restitution to the defrauded homeowners. And for the first time since we'd moved in, Patricia's composure shattered. She sobbed uncontrollably, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong, that she'd earned that money through her dedication to the neighborhood. As the bailiffs led her away, she was still screaming that Maple Ridge would crumble without her, that property values would plummet, that we'd all regret it. But standing there watching her disappear through those courtroom doors, I realized something. For the first time in months, the neighborhood was actually quiet, truly quiet. And that silence, it was the sound of freedom.